I've seen the development of Kazakhstan. It was just a miracle in the region. One of the things that all economies have to do is be resilient. We must develop a vibrant domestic capital market. We have to develop a culture of risk-taking.
Welcome back to the Astana Times YouTube channel. I'm your host, Marcia Favale, and we are now here today at the Development Bank of Kazakhstan to be joined by an independent director of the board of the Development Bank of Kazakhstan, Marcia Elizabeth Christian Favale. Thank you very much, Marcia, for having us today in this beautiful office of the DBK.
It's my pleasure. Welcome.
So my first question will be a bit personal. I was wondering if you could share with us your personal story. How did you get into this sector, into the banking and financial sector? What did attract you in this field in the first place?
Oh, wow. So I studied political science at NYU, New York University, and this is graduating in 1992. And there was a big push in American investment banking to bring people that were not just doing business. Of course, in political science, I did, obviously study economics and et cetera. They wanted to have people that could understand cultures and that could understand how policy, culture, and economics could come together to strengthen investment banking, right? So I was part of that cohort of new people coming in that were not trained at Wharton or undergrad businesses like Stern. I did, again, political science at NYU. And my first job was at Bankers Trust, and then I went to Merrill Lynch. And as the market for emerging market developed, obviously speaking Portuguese and Spanish helped. I'm American, but I know these languages. And I always thought it was absolutely fascinating because I didn't come from the spreadsheet view. I came from, government, policy, how policy can impact the economy, and then how do you ascertain value from bottom up. I found it fascinating to work in investment banking for the emerging markets because it wasn't just like, okay, there's no risk in America, risk-free rate. It was about understanding the entirety of the culture and the policies and the government and the flows of money coming in and out, and how does that impact value from a government, right, from a sovereign, from a provincial or state down to an actual company. So that's why I got into it, and then I stayed. And from Merrill Lynch, and I remember when emerging markets was an extension trade for American high yield, right? I was like, oh, you're an American high yield, and take a little Brazil, take a little Mexico. But as I stayed, I'm one of the veterans. And then from Merrill Lynch, I went to UBS. I actually helped start out of London. Once they did their merger, UBS, CEMEA, Emerging Market Corporate Bond Research, and I had joined LATAM before in Stanford, New York, LATAM being Latin America, consolidated both, became a managing director there. There's something called the institutional investor, and I ranked #1 at the time as an emerging market analyst. And then I went to trade money at Brevin Howard. So everything there was the sell side. Then I went to trade money. I'm telling people who take money in, right? They take the investment what to do, so maybe I should learn what that means. And so I went to Brevin Howard and Advent Capital Management, so sell side, buy side. So it's a unique understanding of the entire value chain. And I also did special situations, so I knew about illiquid asset management as well, not just what's in the market. So I just found it a fascinating, composition, a mosaic of value that you need to interpret, and I love interpreting things.
That's a very wonderful career story because I also graduated political science.
Oh, there you go.
And I haven't even thought that I could also maybe end up in
you could have a future in finance.
Sector,
And then after that, when I was in London, this is a great story. There was a junior capital markets woman of Turkish descent who said, hey, I did an RFP for a country called Kazakhstan. I'm like, okay, I can't get anyone senior to come. Would you come? And I'm all about mentoring and promoting. So I said, you know what? Yeah, I'll make time in my schedule. Okay. And I flew to Kazakhstan 2001, and that was at love and first sight. And then, funny story is that we ended up doing, us at UBS, the first Eurobond deal for the Development Bank of Kazakhstan and for the country. Before that, there was sovereign loans. So this was the benchmark deal. And I was part of the corporate research. At that time, corporate research was the ones that really dictated how something is going to perform and et cetera.
Moving on to the next question, you were the senior advisor to the Prime Minister of Kazakhstan between 2009 and 2013, and you also was at the forefront of the development of the People's IPO program. Could you share with us what were your initial impressions of the country's financial landscape and how have they changed over the years until now?
Okay, that's a very important question, actually. And I'm going to modify the word initial because, as we talked about in our, right before, I started coming to the country in 2000, 2001, and so I've seen the development of Kazakhstan post-Soviet Union and how it was just a miracle in the region, and it still is, by the way. This is still one of the most important economies in the region. Others try, but we continue. Kazakhstan continues to be a beachhead. So I won't talk about initial, but I'm going to talk about the evolution. You see, Kazakhstan always was seen for SEMIA, remember we talked about Central East, Middle East, and Asia, as a beacon of banking reform, especially led by the twice, I think, your National Bank Governor, Grigory Marchenko. Highly, highly respected in the world at the time. So the banking system was actually one of those go-to markets that investors always invested in. I know this because, as I told you, having worked at UBS and running the Department of Emerging Markets, from the research side, right, I was the person that was telling people you should buy or sell or whatever on the credit markets, right, on the bond market. So it was seen as a robust, well-managed banking system. So here comes 2009 when
The financial crisis, right?
See, so that's why I said it's not initial, right? Because here you have an exogenous issue coming in and causing and wreaking havoc starting 2007, 8, creeping up, hitting us strongly end of 2008 and 2009. And so all of a sudden the entire world was, trying to figure out what to do with the liquidity crunch. That's why I said it's not an initial impression. So what was interesting is that by doing the burden sharing framework that we talked about before, Kazakhstan, through the leadership, the prime minister at the time and the minister of finance and all of the ministry and the president, of course, really saw that they have to become resilient. Okay? One of the things that all economies have to do is be resilient. Not just Kazakhstan, the United States, Brazil, Germany. I mean, we just seen with the war how you have to be resilient in energy, right? So resilient. So when we finished the financial restructuring, which was successful, and there were two aspects of it, 2 stages of it. I also pitched the idea of the People's IPO. I knew that there was a privatization program, right? We have some beautiful assets, and privatizations can help if you do it correctly. And the People's IPO that I pitched, and again, government liked, was the idea of creating 2 very, very important things. Hope. Okay, I'm going to pause here. We have to create hope in the population. People have to aspire for a better life. A better life that they can control, and a better life that they should share in. So the People's IPO entire modus operandi, ethos, raison d'être, the reason why, was that we would get the people that already participate in the pension fund system, obligatory, right, it's mandatory, and pro rata them some of the ownership in companies that would go private. Not the voucher system that didn't work. Put it within the pension funds that are managed by professionals so that the people that are unaware of value and how to calculate value in the market wouldn't be taken advantage of, as allegedly many were during the voucher system. So we had 5 pension funds, if I recall at the time, and that was before the unification. So the idea was, okay, so I should participate as an everyday Kazakh into the assets of my country that are going public, right, or being partially sold. And at the same time, create a domestic capital market. So here we go. There's the hope of the everyday person, because imagine if you're in the pension fund system and now you have equity and it grows, maybe you can buy your first house. Maybe you can leave a legacy for your grandchildren. That's hope. And that's also political, economic stability. You want people to be partners in the process of the development of your country. Okay? And then the second is, if we can have that robustness and now you can share and then trade these domestic assets that are privatized, yes, from the big exchanges, but we should also have them developing a domestic capital market more robust that creates resilience. So when internationals go, you're cut off because you're not doing what I want, like they threatened us with the privatization. Well, I'm sorry, with the restructuring. We can say, okay, you have that resiliency, but it also creates something else. It creates hope for entrepreneurs. It creates the ability of you looking for domestic participation. So the two-prong was to create wealth for the middle class and those participating as well in the pension fund, so all classes, and as well to incentivize a domestic capital market that would then evolve into participating in helping us create the next entrepreneurs, which every country needs. So what changed? In summary, we had the exogenous impact. We had all these problems with the banks. We had to get out of the NPLs. We had to restructure the banks. But at the same time, it opened up for new promises and new views of how to do something. Unfortunately, the People's IPO did not happen. The pension funds were consolidated. And then, unfortunately, to the way we wanted to do it didn't happen, right? But other efforts have come out, like AIFC. But I still think there's room, and we must develop a vibrant domestic capital market that incentivizes venture capitalism, incentivizes entrepreneurs. This is extremely important as we talk about diversifying the economy.
And this is what we have witnessed just recently, some of the privatization programs going on with the airlines and also upcoming programs that will put some of the biggest companies of the country on IPO list and maybe giving people hope, as you just mentioned.
To participate in the growth of the country.
Yes, exactly. And in your role as an independent director of the Development Bank of Kazakhstan, could you tell us what are the strategic goals of the Development Bank and how do you plan to achieve them as a board of directors?
So a couple of things. I always explain the Development Bank's role as a financial influencer. Let's make it edgy. Let's make it real.
Yes.
We are influencers. The Development Bank is an influencer, and so are other entities. And as an influencer, we need to have impact. And since we are here to help the country, we have to have positive impact. So if you start thinking about us as an influencer, what do? We influence the economy. What is our mandate? Just summarizing it, is to diversify the economy outside of those which are extraction, right? It's very common. Everyone knows what that is. We have, and I've got all these numbers for you, we have, since I've been on the board, injected about 4.5 trillion Kazakh tenge in the economy.
Impressive.
We were supposed to do 4.4, but we never like to be just what you expect. And when you start looking at how we're changing, I mean, how can you diversify an economy? You diversify an economy by acting not only to help public companies, but to incentivize, here we go, private. So you will see that based on the numbers, in 2023, over 70% of our loan book has to do with private companies. So that's the first frontier. Investing in private, not only public, projects that impact the country. Now, we all know impact can mean how many people you hire, the taxes given, all of that. I'm not going to go into that detail. But the most important part is that we inject money, and we inject money, the capital allocation of that money has to be smart. So how have we done that waterfall? Into private projects, so over 70%. And also in certain key areas that we have to focus on. Now, we can't invent a sector yet. We have to look at the industries that exist, where there's competitive advantage and where there's a need as well for its development with government money and with the money that we get from the market as a BBB rated entity. So we're in metallurgy, we're in oil refinery, in food and beverages, very important. Import substitution is extremely important. Okay, we need to produce our own food for food security. Okay, with that said, we have to look at transportation and logistics, so that productivity, right? The productivity enhances. Mechanical engineering and energy. So we are very much focused in agriculture, manufacturing, on the other industries that I said. I'm always pushing for not just agriculture, but agrotech. Okay?
Yeah.
And when you think through, like, what are we thinking about investing? How is this important? We want to go to value-added, higher value-added products. Okay? And so to do that, we're looking at medium to high value impact projects in the processing part. So products, companies, and projects that add to the value chain, not basic, that add to the value chain. And I think that's an extremely important point to focus on, because that really gives value, that gives you higher margins, and that incentivize not only domestic growth, growth through exports. So that's extremely important for what we're doing.
And speaking about the volume of injections that the bank has made, could you outline maybe 3 key sectors that the bank has focused on? And also you mentioned agriculture, which is a very important sector for Kazakhstan. And just recently, during the meeting with the Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, the bank's leadership expressed its readiness to invest, and I quote, a staggering 1.2 trillion tenge.
That 1.23 trillion is not only DBK, it's DBK plus co-financing, it's bringing in second-tier banks, international investors, domestic investors, obviously DBK. So you have to think about it in the general conversation, right? So that answers that question. We're going to focus a lot on manufacturing. We're going to focus a lot on agriculture, infrastructure, because there's no point in you producing something if you can't get it around, right? Because one of the things that people forget is that your infrastructure actually has a direct effect on your productivity, and therefore unit cost of your productivity, right? So we want high margins, so we need to make sure that we have the logistics in place to support our industries, right? But what's growing and that we're focusing is in ESG. So we've been talking about ESG for a long time, but everything takes a time to germinate and to create an infrastructure. And I'm proud to say that out of the box, we've gotten a 3 rating, 60 points, right, Fitch? So it's 1 to 5. An impressive start for an entity like the Development Bank that has legacy. And of course, the legacies are not looking at ESG in the standards that the world looks at. Now, the importance of ESG, let's just talk about the exogenous importance, is that there's about 35 trillion in sustainable development ESG investments. That's the market. That's huge.
That's huge, yeah.
In green finance, it's about 4 trillion. I'm talking dollars. We need to participate in attracting that kind of money into the country. So we have like 9 projects, as you know, in the renewable area. We have 2 approved this year, and we're going to continue to look at projects. But you have to look at it smartly. You can't just go running into it. You have to look at it smartly because it's still a company. It still has to go to rigorous analysis. It still has to make sense on a risk-reward basis, even adjusted for a development bank. And that's what we're working hard. And when you look at the environmental impact, of course, everyone understands that you have to be climate conscious. I mean, we can't afford not to be. And you also have to look at the social impact, right? And the governance. And we lead by example. And so being able to focus on sustainable development and understanding what sustainable development actually means to an economy is what we're promoting as influencers. If people actually look at it dispassionately, they see that the long-term effects of sustainable development, that's what ESG means, will give you better profitability in a holistic view. Not just profitability for this quarter, the profitability going forward. In all aspects, that profit should be seen. Your health, the culture, the health of your economy, the products you produce, the climate conscious impact of it, and actually the ultimate product. So if you look at profit as the holistic viewpoint, then people should adhere to it and not be afraid of it.
And now I want to focus more on your view on the current foreign investment trends in the country, and maybe what's your opinion on how can the country do more and do better to attract foreign investments?
Well, listen, I was also on the board of Kazakh Invest, I'm sure you know that. I think that the government has an agenda of being forward-facing, which I think it's important. I think that having foreign direct investment is always important for every country. But I don't want to lose sight how equally important it is to develop domestically. Okay, I keep trying to make sure that we understand that. We have to create our money managers. We have to create our entrepreneurs. We have to incentivize them internally. But in terms of a foreign investment, of course it's important. You know, you need it for currency management, you need it for knowledge transfer, you need it to even uproot an industry that you're trying to develop. And I think that we participate, you know, actively. I mean, we have, in my numbers are correct, we have about 23% of our projects have foreign participation in DBK, in the Development Bank of Kazakhstan. So obviously, we look to champion, promote, bring in, co-finance, incentivize, and be conscious of impact from foreign direct investment. And I think the government is active. This is a government, and the government in Kazakhstan doesn't hide. It's active in roadshows, in workshops, in conferences. I think, however, that there are a couple things that foreign investors continuously are concerned about. We have to, better our corruption index. I mean, that's one of the first things people talk about, right? Yes. We have to have tax regimes that make sense, and I know that additional economic zones are going to be developed that could incentivize that. I think streamlining of registration processes, these basic microprocesses and processes that you would need are as important as big roadshows.
Yes.
So ultimately, when people do the due diligence, they're going to want to know about the corruption, they're going to want to know about the regulations, they're going to want to know about the tax incentives, and they're going to want to know how they can manage currency instability. But at the same time, the government has to be smart, right? You have to manage investors as well. You can't have investors just come and ask for everything that they want without understanding the reality of the country that they're actually investing, right? And they should get a better risk return. There is a consciousness. I mean, I remember the President Tokayev talking about how important entrepreneurship is, and women even impact of entrepreneurship, right? He's forward-facing, right? And I think that there are initiatives of the government throughout the Bytedx system to help entrepreneurs, to help small businesses, help people go up the economic ladder, for sure. But I also think that perhaps we have to develop a culture of risk-taking.
And what does it mean?
Okay, so we need to applaud people who fail big.
Yeah.
That's it.
I
Not look down.
Totally agree.
We have to applaud people who fail big. If you want the next unicorn, and what's interesting is everyone focuses on unicorn. I'm actually putting out a book that says let's actually incentivize the everyday innovator, not just the unicorns. Okay, because that's not something that everyone's going to reach, not even in the United States, right? But you have to believe two things. This is my mantra: that genius can come from anywhere and everywhere, and we live that in DBK. And I'm talking a little bit about the culture because I know you have a question on that. But we also have to inculcate that in the country. We have to allow people to fail big. And it's not shameful. Yes, you took money, you did the right thing, you didn't embezzle it, you invested it, and it didn't work out. Rather than going, that person's a failed, business person. No, okay, well, it could have been the market, it could have been timing. So a person that's willing to take risk and not be reckless should be applauded.
Exactly.
We should teach people you're going to lose money. Everyone that invests in startups know you should lose money. So we shouldn't have a culture like, I lost money, I'm not going to do it. No, you're supposed to lose money. If every single person that you invested made money and were successful, then we wouldn't be talking about this, right? So I think this culture, real culture of investing in entrepreneurs here and applauding failure would be a game changer. So we can't be a society, and other societies, not just Kazakhstan, where you fail down. Because someone that tried earnestness and had a product or had a business plan and it didn't work out, they actually have probably a better chance to go around and do better in the next time. You think that Elon Musk, everything he touched was, no, he's had failures. So failing up should be part of our society.
So Marcia, now the question that I would like to focus on, and because we talked about the culture, could you tell us how has the culture changed within the bank?
I'm really happy to talk about this because I think it's a great role model for other companies, and I think it's important for people to feel good in their professional life. So over the time that I've been with the bank, we have focused on very important things. One, creating a culture of meritocracy. And I think that's very important because there was a trend that when people changed, that they would bring new management or they would bring new people as they were appointed differently to head, for example, DBK. And we really accepted the initiative of saying, well, wait a minute, institutional knowledge should be valued, praised. Loyalty should be valued and praised. So instead of replacing people, so you can bring in your friends, why don't we just look at the people who are already what we say good assets, good athletes, i.e. good professionals, and train them and promote them. So I have some numbers for you because I think the world should know this. So since 2018, we started promoting for higher positions 29% of our staff. Okay, so when we look for promotions, 29% were people were there. 32 in 2019, 45 in 2020, 31, 22, 46 last year, and even now, 50% of the promotions have been internal. So I think that is an amazing culture. Also, championing women, not just because they're women, acknowledging they're good professionals and why should they not be seen. And so taking that pause was an absolutely impressive thing. And so right now, 56% of our staff are women, but in leadership, 51. So this idea of let's look at the best professional with the skill set and let's put training behind that is important. So what does that mean? You can start seeing that I'm an unusual board member. And with the other independent board members, we have changed the culture too of being accessible.
That's great to
We're
hear.
accessible. We do free training, workshops. We do strategy meetings with everybody in the bank.
And one of my last questions, and probably the last questions, is about the impact of all the global developments that we have seen over just few years, with the COVID pandemic, with the financial crisis, with the war and conflicts going everywhere in the world, how those global developments impact Kazakhstan's economy and how the economy is doing in general to, buffer those external shocks, let's say.
Right. Well, it's always difficult when you talk about external trends, but let's just break that down. The pandemic affected everybody. As an example of the bank, in February, we already started saying that we needed to look at the supply chain of our companies and see how they could be impacted and be proactive. So we were ahead of the curve. And that's why you didn't see a lot of restructurings in our portfolio. So so that was an effort. Hey, this is going to get potentially worse. Let's be proactive. The government did very well in trying to stem the tide of infections and vaccines and in solidarity, right? And I think everyone struggled with that. So taking a pandemic outside of it because, right? Kazakhstan is vulnerable to geopolitical trends. Obviously, what happened in Russia and the war of Russia in the Ukraine. Many investors got concerned, where would Kazakhstan stand in between that? And I think Kazakhstan astutely managed their independent view and almost their neutrality, but while still being able to be, friendly with their neighbors, but still saying, no, I'm not recognizing the sovereign entities that you want me to. And navigating that takes a lot of intelligence, a lot of EQ and IQ. So well done, government. And I think that when people started seeing that Kazakhstan can hold its course in what they think is right, you notice that interest still continued. So that differentiation was astute, and the management with aplomb. Okay. But then again, we also had to, for example, in the bank and in other places, figure out who's on the sanction list and do that kind of, compliance and risk management, because sanctions, some people were on the sanction, you had to change ownership, and we all know this in the government, right? Obviously, energy policy is important around the world. What's going to happen with oil spikes, or oil going up, oil going down, problems in the Middle East, Israel and Gaza now at war. And any other uprising in the Middle East will affect, obviously, oil prices, which affects the budget. These are things that we can't manage but we can manage the impact. And we do manage that impact by saying, okay, let's build resilience. Let's build more renewable energy capacity. Let's build more resilience against, the shocks of the exogenous factors, right? But if we continue to see war in the world, we're going to, everyone is going to suffer. So right now, we're living in a period of high intensity, a lot of worry about will the Middle East war expand? Hopefully, there will be peace with Ukraine, right? And how is the United States going to view China? Is this going to escalate or not? And the biggest challenge for Kazakhstan will be, how do you manage your relationships with your neighbor while looking to the west, looking to the south, and i.e. South America, and looking to Asia, and being able to manage that friction and that tension. And so far, I think that Kazakhstan has done it in a marvelous way.
That's all my questions, Marcia. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much
for your
this
time.
insightful conversation tonight, and thank you for having us in this beautiful office.
My pleasure. Thank you.